I will try to shortly brief about what actually going on the ground right now. What are the trends and my personal and the IDF perspective about the situation and the trends in the West Bank. And to give you my perspective about the many factors that actually shape the situation. The PA, the Hamas, the IDF itself, etc. First of all, we enjoy more or less a few years of stability in the region. I mean, when we are talking about stability, I must talk not about the three shooting attack last week, but if I look at the last decade and compare the security situation those days to what happened in the area a decade ago, while buses were blew up by suicide bomber in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, we are in relatively security stability. But in the last few months, we definitely face some escalation on the ground. We can put the finger on the, in some way, on the operation in Gaza last November, but we see it in many cases. The situation is depends on the internal situation among the Palestinian society, the struggle between the Fatah movement and the Hamas, or to be more accurate, it's not the Hamas movement and the Fatah movement, it's the idea of Makawma, the idea of resistance, and the competitive idea of dealing with Israel. The PA take the ways that they deal with almost no flexibility, with very tough agenda, and they, at the same time, they use both political and international pressure and some resistant, what they call the Makawma Sha'abiyya Salmiya, resistant, but no armed intifada, but some resistant in other ways. Sometimes it's throwing Molotov cocktails as part of the game, but it's not a terrorism. While the Hamas represent the idea of resistance, but since in the last 6-7 months, we also see that the idea of resistance, the first like all the way of resistance are legitimate. That said by people from the PA or from the Fatah, we see that the situation on the ground is very much sensitive to such talks, and we definitely see some change in the atmosphere, in the mood, in parts of the Palestinian societies that change the situation on the ground. For example, the number of stone throwing, rock throwing, cocktail Molotov that's throwing on Israeli civilian in the West Bank are doubled in the last months. We see more and more Tanzim Fatah people. The Tanzim is the organization, of course, related to the Fatah movement that are involved in terror, including, in some cases, people from the Palestinian security forces that are involved in terror. We see more and more influence by terrorists from Gaza that try to launch their activities in the West Bank. In one way, the Hamas is very restrained in Gaza itself. he preferred to enhance his administration in Gaza, especially since operation in November. But in the other end, he has a vision, and he translates this vision into kind of a plan, how to dominate the Palestinian society through the PLO and directly in the West Bank. I don't think that the Hamas can get into power in a military way in the West Bank, not as long as we are on the ground, but it can do it in several other ways. It won't be easy because the President Abu Mazen himself and the Fatah movement do not really want to this reconciliation with the Hamas go forward, but the Hamas is still very powerful in the West Bank. I guess that more and less half of the population support the Hamas in the West Bank. He cannot translate this popularity into real power, not military power and not an administrative power. In that case, Israel and the PA have a wide range of mutual interest. And we use this mutual interest in order to stop the Hamas from gaining more and more power in the West Bank. We are not cooperate with the PA on that issue, but each part do his job. I mean, the Palestinian security forces, they do not work for me, they do not work for us, they work for the Palestinian interest. They work according to the directive of Abu Mazen, and we are doing our job, first of all, to stabilize the situation on the ground, to protect the Israeli population both in the area and in the Israeli home front. But in some cases, we do have a mutual interest, counter-terrorism. It's not easy to command in the IDF forces in Judea and Samaria. It's quite complex and quite fragile situation. All the time we have to balance between many tension. In one hand, we do have a very clear mission, and it's to protect the Israeli citizen in home front, to stabilize the security situation on the West Bank, to counter terrorism. But we should do it in a way that separate between the terrorists and the main populations that do not involve in terrorism, to do it in a quite accurate way. We enjoy an intelligence superiority. We have the freedom of action, the ability to access into almost everywhere, which is a very crucial condition in order to counter terrorism. The security barrier between the West Bank and home front in Israel still have a very important, is very important factor, even though thousands of people crossing this barrier every day, both Israelis and Palestinians. But the fact that we can kind of monitoring who is going out and in is very important as part of our security condition, or security headstones in order to counter terrorism. We are also, the Central Command is also taking a look to the east, to the Jordan side of the Jordan River. We see what's going on in Jordan. The stability in Jordan is course, is quite important for Israel and from our perspective, from the military mission. The fact that friction like Jubhat al-Nusra, which is an Al-Qaeda affiliated group in Syria that tried to infiltrate into Jordan, cannot go through Jordan to the West Bank is very important in order to stabilize the situation. And our mission is both to create, sometimes in some coordination with the Jordanian side, the stability along our eastern border and the main area of the West Bank itself. We're not dealing only with military tools. You actually cannot get this security stability by using military tools or only military tools. For example, the economical factor, we think that it's crucial. We emphasize the fact that, for example, the ability of the PA to pay salaries to the huge public sector is very important for the stability in the PA. The fact that people from the security forces, but also teachers, doctors, etc., get their salaries is stabilize the situation, of course, and the opposite is the same. So we try to ease the ability of the Palestinian to rule themselves, or to and sometimes in tension with some security needs. It's much easier to stop terrorism getting out of Jenin refugee camp by closing the Jenin area, or stop or block all the ways from Jenin to Nablus, for example. But at the same time, we understand very well that the economical situation in the north part of the West Bank also has a crucial security. It's our interest. In the same way, we let thousands of Arab Israelis, get into the cities of the Palestinian city in the West Bank. Every weekend, thousands of cars getting from Natzeret, from the Galilee, into Jenin, into Tulkarem, to other places, in order to help the Palestinian economy to not to be dependent only on the international community, and to create some growth and economical growth, and to help them to pay their salaries, to live in an honest way. The last couple of months of very intensive American involvement is also has some positive influence on the ground, mainly on the PA. The PA, for example, almost stopped financing the groups that deal with some riots and protests against Israel, and they halt the funds of this group in the last couple of months. But in the same way, if in few weeks the attempt of the American involvement will go with nothing, I'm afraid that we will see this trend of escalation even strengthen. That's the main issues that we are dealing on the ground, and please.
Thank you. Dan Williams from Reuters. General, the defense minister who's just landed from Paris was empowered this week to outlaw Israeli Jews, presumably most of them settlers, who've been defined, or who he can define, as members of an illegal organization because they're involved in so-called price tag attacks. Do you have, presuming you're going to be consulted about this, do you have a list of names that you'd like to see outlawed? And do you think the measures would be enough, given that it does not seem that Israel is ready yet to treat these people like it would, what it would define as terrorists, say Palestinian groups, etc.?
I want to refer to the legal issue or the decision in the Israeli government about this issue, but I do act against those people, Israelis, citizen, Jewish, who are destabilize the situation. I got a lot of criticism from the people from the settlement or others on the fact that I give a lot of administrative order in order to take dozens of people out of the West Bank. Those people, we have an intelligence that they are involved in terror activities like burning mosques, or they do have they do create a dangerous to the stability on the ground. But unfortunately, we do not have enough proofs that are enough for put them behind bars in court. So in that cases, we prefer to put them behind bars according to the right way to bring them into justice. And in cases that we do not have enough proof, I do use administration order in order to take them out of the area at least. And the IDF is not directly responsible to deal with Israeli citizens. It's the responsibility of the Israeli police. It is the responsibility from the intelligence point of view in part of the Shabak. But we take the overall responsibility on that issue. And my troops have a very clear directive in order to prevent those cases.
Are you encouraged by the decision this week in the Security Cabinet? The situation will improve?
I'm not sure that it's very important. I think that in one hand we do have it's a very complicated mission. But I don't think that the fact that they call it terror activities or not is the main issue. When there is a terror, when people launch what we understand as a terror activity, like burning mosques or throwing cocktail Molotov on a car, it's a terror activities, and we do have the tools to deal with it from the operational perspective, not always from the legal perspective.
I'm going to take the chairman's privilege and ask a question. Maybe take this into a different direction. Around 2004, 2005, we witnessed that Al-Qaeda in Iraq was trying to base itself in Jordanian cities like Irbid and trying to recruit Palestinians from the West Bank for its operations. There has been because of the breakdown of the Iraqi state, a revival of terrorist activity in Anbar province and in western Iraq. Have you seen any, are you concerned about any projection of those problems towards us in the future?
Well, it's my job to be concerned about such problems. But again, I feel quite confident with our ability to stop these attempts as long as we do have the ability to create, to preserve our intelligence abilities and the freedom of access to targets of those people. And of course, there is some, we need some cooperation with states in the international community, etc., in order to face this challenge.
Please.
General Max Rosendahl from the Associated Press. You recently signed a seizure order around the settlement of Itamar. That settled the order, the lands that the order had taken correspond to a road that the settlers had built illegally some years ago. And so this and some other instances have given rise to allegations that the army is actually working with the settlers in order to expropriate more land. I was just wondering if you can respond to those allegations.
Well, I must remind you that 2 years ago, two terrorists from the village of Awalta get into Itamar and murder the family, Fogel family, killed the father and the mother, a 3-month baby, and 2 other boys. We have some lesson learned from that terror attacks, and Itamar is a settlement that suffered from 21 casualties, 21 people that killed in the last, since 2000. So we have some lesson learned from the Fogel murder, and we enhanced the fence around Itamar, etc. We do had a long and work with the legal people in order to minimize the lands that get into the fence of Itamar. Actually, the new fence is taking some of the olive trees of Walta and Betfurik out of the fence that surrounded Itamar right now. So we didn't, I can agree for that affairs that we work for the settlers in order to capture land, etc. By the way, people from the villages around Itamar can get into this area in order to harvest the olive tree, etc. But they have to coordinate it with the COGAT, with the civil administration in the West Bank.
Hello, General. I'm Barbara Opal Rome, Bureau Chief in Israel for Defense News. Excuse me. You mentioned that Kerry's shuttle diplomacy is having a stabilizing effect on the ground now in the West Bank. And my question is, how long can this sense of hope and expectation of some type of diplomatic breakthrough be sustained before the street turns and perhaps considers a more violent means of resistance? That's one question. And the second question has to do with Jordan, and you mentioned your cooperation with the Jordanian... Coordination with the Jordanian authorities. Given the American decision to leave F-16s and Patriot batteries in the kingdom to fortify Jordan's defenses, will your mandate expand in terms of actual coordination with the Americans, or maybe a trilateral form of cooperation as we move forward in the months ahead?
Your first question, well, I wish that I would know how long it can sustain and what will the circumstances after the American attempt. But first of all, as a military commander, my job is to prepare for escalation. And that's what we try to do. But at the same time, we try to maintain the security on the ground. I mean, we can make some preparations that will create some escalation, so we try not to do that. Regarding to the time that we still have, I don't know. But when I look to short term, Secretary Kerry will be in the region next week. Then in the July 8th or July 9th, we start the Ramadan month, which is also might stabilize the area. From our point of view, we if we won't get any specific terror alert, we will try to ease as much as we can and let 100,000 of Palestinians get into Jerusalem and to other places during the Ramadan. We did the same in the last year, and there were more than a million movement between the West Bank and Jerusalem, mainly during Fridays to pray in Al-Aqsa Mosque, but also to shop at the malls in Jerusalem and other places. So we will do whatever we can in order to what we call maintenance. Actually, we used to have some partner in the Palestinian side. Fayyad was his ideology was to also to maintenance the situation on the ground. He preferred to bring water to the city of Hebron than to go to the U.S. UN Council in New York. But he's not a main player anymore. So we will try to do whatever we can in order to keep this stability. I do not have a clear answer what will happen, whether the status quo is stable or not. I'm not sure that it's stable, but I'm not sure that it's not stable.
That's a unique answer.
Yeah.
And on the Jordanian...
Well, I don't know about an American plan to leave Patriot missiles or F-16 in the Jordanian hand. I look very carefully about the drill, the Eagle Lion drill, etc. And we do have our connection both with the American and the Jordanian. And it's not a secret that Israel see the stability and the security of Jordan as Israeli strategic interest. And we will keep coordinate with all sides in order to get this goal.
Asher Naim. Psychology a little bit.
It's very important.
Yeah. What happens to all these Palestinians, Israelis, who visit the West Bank? And what happens to the Palestinians, the West Bank, who visited Israel? How do they look at each other? Are they envious? Are they treat them like traitors? Not enough doing for the Palestinian issue? How this psychology works between these two groups?
Well, as he said, psychology is very important. Psychology is something personal. I don't know how the whole society look at the other society. In some way, the Arab Israelis and the Palestinians see themselves as one people, one nation. In the other hand, sometimes they have different interests. And I don't think that it's very important the way that Israel will act and the way it might change. I mean, I remind you that in October 2013, Israeli Arabs in Wadi Ara got killed by Israeli police. But After that, the involvement of Israeli Arabs in the Intifada, in Al-Aqsa Intifada, was almost nothing. Right now, in some cases, we do have some involvement of Palestinian that hold Israeli ID. For example, during the operation in Gaza in November, a terrorist group from Ramallah area launched a terror attack in a bus in Tel Aviv. They used an Israelis, Arab, actually is Palestinians that got Israeli ID. He was the one who take this bomb and put it in the bus. But it's very rare. Most of the Israeli Arabs have an interest to be part of the Israeli society, to enjoy what the state of Israel can offer them, and I don't think that they will participate in violence, even it will occur or happen in the West Bank.
Matthew Calman from the Daily Mail and the New York Daily News. What preparations are you making for the evacuation of the outpost of Amona, which I think is due next month?
Nothing special. If we got the order from the political echelon to do so, the IDF with the other security forces, especially the police, we will do whatever the political echelon will direct us to do, as we did in the past.
Former associate here at the Institute. Several years ago, a preliminary Qassam factory was found in the West Bank. And now with the resurgence of Hamas and even some Al-Qaeda activity, are you finding that kind of activity being planned, being attempted, or is it all at this stage the Molotov cocktail and the rock drop?
No, it's not just Molotov cocktails. As I mentioned, last week we faced 3 terror activities in south of Hebron. Tanzim Fatah guys shot on a military ambulance. The day after, people probably from the Balata refugee camp in Nablus shot on a civilian bus south of Nablus, and not the way on from Nablus to Kalkilia, someone shot at border police jeep. So it's not just the Molotov cocktails. But I don't think that the Hamas and Al-Qaeda will be our main problem at the beginning of a wave of violence. I think it will start from the Tanzim, maybe the GIP in some way, some localized terror cells, but definitely the Hamas will be the one who come on the wave of violence. They will let us will try to create a situation that we will go against the PA, then he will come.
Question back.
Zev Baran, General Honorary Consul of Poland in Jerusalem. General, I want to ask you 2 questions. Did you speculate about the situation eventually in case of escalation between Israel, Syria and Iran? How would react the population of the West Bank, as well as the authority, as well as the population itself, the simple people in the villages and in the towns? That's one thing. Another thing, did you evaluate the motivation of the Israeli soldiers in case of such an escalation? concerning the West Bank especially? Thank you.
For the second question, I think that the motivation of the Israeli soldier is, there is no doubt about it. I think that as far as I know, and I think that I know my soldiers, my troops, they are quite professional, and they do have motivation to do any legal orders that they will get. Remind me the first one. The first question, please.
I asked about the eventual reaction of the population of the West Bank in case of an escalation between Israel, Syria, and Iran. I took part in the Kippur War, and there were such speculations before the war and during the war, and I wonder if there is such a speculation now.
Yeah. Well, we can remember what we saw, for example, during the Iraqi war, for example. Okay, when Scud missiles launched from Iraq to Tel Aviv, people, Palestinian in the West Bank, were dancing on the roofs and celebrating the heroism of Saddam Hussein. I guess that we will see in the same picture, but I don't think that from the military point of view, the resistance of the people in the West Bank will be a major factor from the military perspective. We do plans in the West Bank to control the security situation in the West Bank and allow the IDF to do the rest of his mission along the northern border, or in Gaza, or Iran, or wherever.
There was one question over here before.
I was
Identify yourself.
Mitch Ginsburg from the Times of Israel. Sorry to harp on the matter of just another follow-up on the price tag attacks. I was just wondering if you could say a little bit more specifically why what the main trouble is in terms of arrests, why there haven't been arrests, and if you would consider maybe trying suspects in military courts in the West Bank.
I will give you an example of not a tag price attack, but what I see as a terror attack. A cocktail, Molotov cocktails thrown by kids from the settlement of Batain into a car of a family from Nachalim, wounded 6 people. This is a terror attack, but it's made by kids 12 and a half years old. Some of them are less than 12 years old. We knew after a short inquiry who are those guys. We arrested them. They were get into Shabak inquiry and a police inquiry. They shut up at the inquiry. They were very well prepared to such an inquiry. We didn't cooperate with the policemen or the Shabak investigators. And there was not enough evidence to put them into trial. We tried to put a lot of pressure on their parents or the community. We tried to handle with that issue by people from the community of Gush Etzion, which are very normative people, will put pressure on Batain, the community of Batain. It helps, actually. But this is one answer for your question. They are quite clever, those guys. The guys in Nitzan and others, they are quite familiar with the space that we got from the legal point of view. They are very aware to our intelligence abilities. They do not use cell phones. They do not talk. Even if they people can launch together a terror activity, and the day after they won't talk about it anymore. So it's quite hard to get those evidence. In the other end, we know who are they. They know that we know. So you can see that during 2011, there was 10 or 11 occasions of burning mosques, and in the last year and a half, we had only 2 or 3. So our pressure, even though we are not always can bring them into justice, is quite effective.
And the military court,
And
the use of the military courts as a tool.
the use or not the use of the military code is not a question that the military officers should answer. It's a political decision, actually.
A follow-up question on Jordan. Jordan seems so far to have weathered the Arab Spring, at least the radical upheavals that have been seen in North Africa and Egypt. Is it your assessment that this will continue to be the case? Are you troubled by the possibility that a few months down the line, it won't be the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, but something else if it follows in the wake of other countries?
Well, I think that the Jordanian dealing in a very clever way with their challenges, both from inside and from outside. And my hope is that they will stay stable.
One more.
Okay.
Make this the last question.
Thank you. General, I was disturbed to hear about that you confirmed that members of the Palestine Security Force in fact have engaged in terror, and I'm wondering whether there should be a mechanism that allows Israel to vet these people, and if there is a mechanism, as I know there is, that allows Israel to vet these people, isn't there also a mechanism for periodic evaluation of the people that are being trained with U.S. Taxpayer funds and or police force which is trained with funds from the EU?
Well, I want to be very clear on that point. I think that the Palestinian security forces have a very positive, they are a very positive factor in stabilize the situation right now. The fact that people from the security forces are engaged in terror, we see it as a very severe phenomena. But we try to understand whether it's a phenomena, whether it's some individuals that are involved in terrorism. And of course we look very carefully the way the Palestinian commanders deal with this issue. And from our perspective, whether they will deal with them or not, we will deal with terrorism. So in some cases they arrest their own people. They some of them admit that they were involved in terror. Sometimes they arrest them for a few months and release them, and we arrest them and put them in jail. So we do have not a periodic, an ongoing assessment about this issue. Of course, we talk all the time with the American USSC team and etc. And we focus on that issue.
Okay, I don't see. Oh, okay, one more. This is it. Aaron Hecht, Front Page Jerusalem Radio. General, Dr. Gold mentioned that Al-Qaeda has attempted to infiltrate Palestinian communities in the West Bank, and presumably they haven't stopped trying. So what, in your assessment, does the Palestinian Authority and or Hamas have power to resist those attempts, and do they have motivation to resist those attempts?
We do have the motivation to stop these attempts. And as long as we are in the area and control the area, we won't let this that happen. I think that the PA do have the motivation to do it. I'm not sure that they will have the ability, the complete ability to do so. We can look at the Gaza Strip, and the Hamas itself are worried about Al-Qaeda affiliated groups that try to destabilize what the Hamas see as his achievement in Gaza. But I don't want the Hamas to get those achievements in the West Bank and stop Al-Qaeda. So we will do it by our own forces right